Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. This is my first trip to Germany. I have now been here 3 days. I've had a wonderful time. I've eaten some great food. Everyone has been very kind. The public transportation is wonderful. And so I'm very pleased to be able to speak to you this evening. The topic that I have chosen for this keynote speech is trying to make sense of the Microsoft development platform. And there is a, I think, famous Chinese proverb that says, "May you live in interesting times." And of course, that's a curse, right? Because if you live in interesting times, then you constantly have to change and adapt and deal with all of the things that are going on. And there is no doubt that right now we live in interesting times. However, for this talk, I thought I would start by giving just a brief overview of my personal career, because I think I've always lived in interesting times. And I think that's a useful perspective when we think about the Microsoft platform and the fact that there are 5 ways to create a user interface and maybe 8 ways to talk to SQL Server. Do we really need 8 ways to talk to SQL Server? I don't think so. But that's what we have. And so it can be very confusing. But at the same time, I think it's worth thinking back. All of us have a career and a track, a path that brought us to where we are today. And every one of us that looks at the world today looks at the technology and the options that we have through a filter that comes from our life experience. My first encounter with a computer was in my 8th year of school, and it was access to a cyber mainframe, which was several hundred miles away. And to connect to the cyber mainframe, we dialed a rotary telephone. You had those, right? Where and the phone tick, 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 tick. And after it would dial, and it would connect with a 110 baud signal, which means that I could type faster than the computer. And then you would plug the phone into the foam receiver and be able to interact. It was very exciting when we got upgraded to 300 baud. That was really, really good. The first computer that I really programmed on or used to build software was an Apple computer. There too, it was really exciting when we got an integer version, a floating point version. Right? Because the first Apple computers were integer only. And to me, the exciting part about programming was the ability to build games. What else is there? I was, a youth at the time. When I went to university, we used digital equipment or DEC, VAX computers with the VMS operating system. And these computers, to me, at first seemed awkward because I was used to an Apple. I was used to having a computer that I had on my desk, and all of a sudden, I'm sharing a computer with all of these other people. But I must tell you that I fell in love with the OpenVMS operating system. The fact that it had seemingly unlimited memory, because OpenVMS had virtual memory. At a time when the PC was just being invented, we had access to 4 gigabytes of memory, in theory. Okay, so maybe not. Also, something I think that is important to me about my actually many years working with OpenVMS. If you look at the picture that I have here, you can see on the wall are many different gray books, or binders, full of paper. In earlier versions of OpenVMS, these were orange. And we referred to this as the orange wall. It was all of the documentation, everything there was to know about the hardware, the operating system, and the software and the programming languages. Everything there was to know was on this gray wall. Today, the gray wall is MSDN, right? Everything there is to know about the Windows platform, the operating system, and the programming languages, we have the same access, except it's through the internet, and it's probably a little more chaotic. While I was in university, I had no money. Strange, that. And so I bought the cheapest computer that I could buy, which was a Commodore 64. The nice thing about the Commodore 64 is that it allowed me to learn the C programming language. When I was in university, with the VAX, we were using Pascal, which was fun. I enjoy Pascal. Right? Pascal eventually gave way to Delphi, and I think a lot of people built their career on this technology. But I was able to learn C. Of course, the programming environment at the time was a small text terminal. But then Commodore invented something which I think is perhaps the best computer of all time, the Commodore Amiga. Yeah? No? Yeah, a few? Good. Yeah. The Commodore Amiga really changed computing in some ways that at the time were revolutionary and today don't seem so exciting, but the Commodore Amiga was the first computer that had a CPU and a GPU and a sound chip that were all separate. No other computer had done this. And this was exciting because it meant that the Amiga was able to do graphics and sound in a way that most computers could not. And I look at this and I think, well, they pioneered what we have today. Because today, all of our computers have a separate CPU and GPU, and most of them have a separate sound chip, or even a complete sound system built into the computer. Of course, still, most computing was done using simple text interfaces. Right? But this is also the time when the Macintosh was first coming out, and so there was a lot of experimentation with graphical operating systems and trying to bring them into the mainstream. And so this was also the time when Microsoft really was starting to come into recognition as being a company, and they were attempting to convince us that we should use this thing called Windows. And I looked at Windows. At the time, I was being paid to work on the OpenVMS VAX computers, and I looked at Windows and PCs, and I saw nothing but a toy. Nothing but a toy, because I was using a mini computer, a very powerful computer, at work, and when I went home, I had an Amiga, which could do things that these PCs could not dream of doing. Right? I was a little arrogant. And in the early 1990s, Microsoft finally got a version of Windows that was actually interesting. It was called Windows NT. Do you know why it was interesting? Well, the gentleman that created OpenVMS, his name was David Cutler. He created that operating system, or the core of that operating system. That's why it has virtual memory and the threading model and the processing model on the VAX. Well, he left digital and went to Microsoft and created Windows NT. In fact, here's a bit of trivia that you might know, or maybe not. You know the Arthur C. Clarke movie, with HAL, the computer that turns evil in, right? A Space Odyssey. Well, HAL, H-A-L, is actually IBM, right? If you rotate the I, you get an H, and you rotate the B, you get an A. And so HAL is just one letter off from IBM. Windows NT, or WNT, is one letter off from VM. It's great, isn't it? So this was the point when I really became interested in programming on the PC. Now, I realize that maybe some of you programmed on PCs before Windows NT, in which case you have my pity. Because the things that people had to do to program on the PC, like managing their own memory and loading and unloading modules to conserve memory, and what were they called, overlays or something? I don't even want to think about it. That really, it causes me a headache. So from that point forward, I was a Microsoft person, right? I mean, Windows to me became very compelling. I used Visual Basic to program Windows. I used Visual Studio. I used .NET. I've enjoyed the fact that we've had graphics cards that have gotten faster and faster to the point that we can make games or graphics run in real time that are nearly as powerful or beautiful as what used to take hours and hours on a supercomputer. Right? If you think back into the 1980s when music videos were really a big thing, and think about some of the videos that came out from the Rolling Stones or from bands like Rush, where they were creating these videos that were completely graphic-based. Well, what they were doing to create those videos was renting time on supercomputers. How many people saw these videos? You know what I'm talking about? The graphics were not exciting. Right? They were three-dimensional, and at the time, I suppose they were exciting, but today they look terrible. And so you think they had to rent time on a supercomputer to create something that my laptop could create without even thinking. So, of course, that means that today, I'm a PC. Right? Of course, being a PC is interesting today because the world that we live in is on a transition point where computing, I think, is becoming the term is ubiquitous, which means that there's computing everywhere. Every aspect of people's lives involves computing. And I think where this is going is interesting because what we will end up with is a situation where computing is everywhere and we never see it. I mean, we see computing today. All of my career, I've seen computing. It's been a keyboard, it's been a mouse, it's been some sort of a computer screen or maybe rolls of paper, right, and a 110 baud modem. But for most of us today, our automobile has a computer. Some of the newer automobiles from Ford have this sync technology, so they communicate with your music players and your telephones, right? In fact, a lot of cars have Bluetooth, so when you get into your car, your phone switches over to the car's stereo instead of using the phone itself. Well, and so now we're talking about phones. How many people have a smartphone? How many people don't have a smartphone, right? That's very proud. I don't have a smartphone. How many people don't have a cell phone? This one guy over here, don't call him. Right? How many people have cable television or satellite television? Almost everyone. The box that's receiving that, it's a computer. You have a DVR or a TiVo, right? A computer. Everywhere we look, we have computers. Our televisions are becoming computers. The last television I bought has an Ethernet plug in the television. Why? So that we can download a patch. Right? I can upgrade my television. What? Now, what's really exciting about the Microsoft platform is that Microsoft has been working for years to make sure that the possibility exists for Microsoft's development tools and operating system to run on the computer, to run on the phone, to run on your television, to run in your car. They're obviously not alone. This is a competitive space, and other companies are trying to do the same thing. But it's exciting to understand that if I learn .NET, I can apply my skills to build Windows applications on a PC, to build Silverlight applications that run in a browser, to build ASP.NET web applications that run anywhere. I can take Visual Studio and use XNA to build games or high-powered graphic applications that run on an Xbox or run on a Windows phone. I can use Expression Studio to build powerful graphics and compelling user interfaces, both for the web and for Silverlight and VPF. I can use Visual Studio 2010 as a really productive development environment. And of course, all of this is based on Microsoft.NET. So at the center of it, if I know C# or Visual Basic and I understand .NET, I'm able to leverage those skills across the entire platform. What this means to me and to you as a consumer, of course, is that computing is everywhere. And so we end up with a situation where I'm interacting with my computer through the Xbox and through my phone and through my laptop and through my desktop computer at home and my desktop computer at work. And of course, what that means is that all of my documents and photographs and home movies of my children and my contact information is scattered everywhere. I don't know if this is true for you, but certainly for me, I have a lot of contact information in Facebook and a lot of contact information in Microsoft Exchange, and I have a lot of contact information in LinkedIn, and it's duplicated, and it's scattered, and it's uncoordinated. And I have documents on my laptop, and I have other documents on my desktop computer at work, and when I'm at home, I wish that I could get at the documents that are on my computer at work, but I can't always. And so I think the vision that we're looking at, that Microsoft is trying to create, and is trying to help us create, is one where we can provide some organization to this. And this really brings us to the software as a service idea. And again, it's not just Microsoft. Right? We truly live in interesting times because it's Microsoft and it's Google and it's other companies that are saying, you know what, if you put all of your contact information into Facebook, if all of your friends are connected to you through Facebook, we'll integrate Facebook into your PC applications. We'll integrate Facebook into your phone so that you can use Facebook maybe as the place for all of your person information or contact information. And Google, for some time now, has been saying, you know what, if you put all of your documents, your spreadsheets and your word processing documents into the Google Documents area, then you can get at them anywhere. And recently, Microsoft joined this game. How many people have gone to docs.com, docs.com? Really, nobody? Microsoft has put a version of Word and a version of Excel and a version of PowerPoint and a version of OneNote on the web for free. And when I say a version, it's a subset, but it's enough for most home users. Right? One of the things that I do for a living is write articles and I write books. I actually use Word. Like a lot of Word. I use indexing and I use auto page numbering and auto figure numbering and auto tables. I really use Word. But my mother writes letters. She doesn't really use Word. Right? She just needs something where she can type in a few paragraphs and then print it to a printer so she can send it to someone. Right? The version of Word that Microsoft has created on the web is easily enough for home users and probably for many Office users. The version of Excel that Microsoft has created on the web is easily enough for most people to get by. If you're an accountant, you will need Excel. But for the rest of us, what Microsoft has provided for free without having to buy anything or even install anything is really pretty compelling. And so we're looking at this future, and the future is not very far away, where a lot of our contact information, our documents, our movies, our video or picture information is going to be stored maybe on our local computer, but also probably in some location on the cloud or in the web. And so this is compelling. It hopefully helps bring all of this together. And I think the thing for us as developers that's really important here is that we don't get left out. If you create an application that does not integrate with Facebook, your application might start to look pretty, do you know the term lame? Right? Primitive? Like you're being left behind? And so Microsoft is trying to help by providing live services. Now I might laugh at live services because Microsoft has been trying for maybe 10 years to convince us that they will give us useful services on the web. Does anybody remember the term hailstorm? No? From 10 years ago? This was their first big attempt. We're going to create services and everyone will give us all of their data. Maybe not so much. Right? But times have changed. We live in interesting times. 10 years ago, I would never have thought about putting my contact information for all of my friends on the web. Today, everybody puts their contact information into LinkedIn, into Facebook, into Plaxo, or other services. Except for these guys that don't have smartphones. Right? They probably don't do that. But the rest of us, almost all of us do. And we do it intentionally. I keep my contact information up to date in LinkedIn because that means all of my contacts always can reach me. Right? My colleagues always have my phone number. And I don't have to update every colleague. When I get a new phone number or a new address or a new email address, which happens, right? My old email gets, all the spammers find it. So I get a new email address. I don't want to have to go tell everybody that I've got a new address. I can just update my profile and they automatically know. Right? To me, this is good. But this also means that if your application needs contact information, so think about your business application. Do you have customers? Nod, yes. If you don't have customers, how do you get money? Right? So yes, we have customers. Do your customers have contact information? Yes. Do you think it would be beneficial if your salespeople could look at the profiles of your customers from Facebook or LinkedIn? Probably. Maybe that's scary. I don't know. Because you might see the personal lives of people. But the idea that you might build business applications that interact with cloud-based services for contact information, for documents, for photographs, I don't think this is so different from what people expect anymore. Of course, at the center of Microsoft's software plus services cloud-based strategy is this idea of Windows Azure. And Windows Azure, I think to a lot of people is confusing because it means several different things. Windows Azure, to some people, is a way of getting hosted Exchange, so they can rent Exchange from Microsoft, or hosted SharePoint. So Microsoft runs a SharePoint server, and I just use it. Right, so this is your BPOS, or business applications hosted in the cloud. This is really Microsoft competing with Google and with Salesforce.com and a number of other companies that are selling applications that they run the application and you use it. Right? And if you need that service, then this is a very nice thing. But I'm a developer. Honestly, I don't care where my Exchange server runs as long as my email works. Right? I don't program Exchange. So to me, the most exciting part about Azure is the fact that I can use .NET to build applications of my own that run on Microsoft's Azure servers. Just last week, I was talking to a customer of Magenic, the company I work for. I was talking to a customer, a large bank, and they are very excited about Azure. They're just starting to explore it. But they're very excited because every time that they start a new software project, they have to go to their IT group, and they have to ask the IT group, please, 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 would you set up a development server for me? And the IT group says, yes, we can do that. Give us 3 weeks. And the development team, what do they do for 3 weeks? Well, I don't know if you have this problem. Maybe all of your IT groups, oh yes, we'll build you a server right now. Here, have a chair. I'll be done in 10 minutes. No? And so this gentleman that I was talking to went on to say, it gets worse because they beg for a development server, then they have to go back and beg for a test server and a staging server, and then when they finish the application, their IT department won't deploy it. And the reason the IT department won't deploy it is because they chose to use a technology, maybe something that's in .NET 4, and the IT department has not yet blessed .NET 4. So they say, no, we won't run your software. And so for this manager who's in charge of building software, he's looking at Microsoft Azure, and he's saying, you know what? If I want a development server, I can go to the Azure web portal, fill out a form, and the server starts up right now. And if I want a test server, I can start up a test server right now. And when I want to go to production, all I've got to do is change the configuration of my Azure application from development or test to production, and it's running. In other words, he can bypass his IT group. And this is making him very happy. To me, the exciting part about Azure development is this. And this is a little bit academic, maybe, but when you build an application on Windows using ASP.NET, what are your options? Well, you might use Windows Server 2008 or 2008 R2. You might use ASP.NET 3.5 or ASP.NET 4 or even ASP.NET version 2. You might use SQL Server or Oracle or DB2. You might run on a computer that has just 2 or 4 gigabytes of memory, or you might be running on a computer with 32 or 64 gigabytes of memory. Right? And the list goes on. The possible variation in your server is extraordinary. And you don't always get to choose, right? Your IT department might choose, you might choose. It might be a combination. The thing about Microsoft's Azure platform is it's always the same. It's always the current version of .NET. It's always the same configuration of the server with the same security parameters. So all of those choices go away. So you might say, that's terrible. I like choice. I like the fact that before I start development, I get to spend 3 weeks debating whether or not we should use a certain technology. I think that's productive. That's a joke. Or you might say, this is wonderful. The fact that I have a very clear target development environment and a very clear target test environment and a very clear production environment that's always the same, this makes me happy because now I don't have to waste time debating with my IT department about what I should or shouldn't use. I know what I have, and I can get down to the business of building software. So to me, this is a lot of what makes Azure very interesting. However, not everyone is real excited about cloud computing. In fact, let me take a question here. How many of you are excited about cloud computing? Uh-oh, there's only one guy. Seriously? Let me ask that again. How many people think that Google and Microsoft have it right? That in fact we want to use internet-based services? I got 3 people. I give up. It's a good thing Microsoft has a better plan. That's all I can say. So you can choose. This is the great thing about the Microsoft platform, is yes, they are putting a lot of energy into the cloud. They've created a version of Windows that runs in the cloud, and they've got all of these services and a version of SQL Server that runs in the cloud. But we still have Windows Server that we can run in our data center. We still have SQL Server that we can run in our data center. And what's best is that the ASP.NET code that you might write in Azure is essentially the same as the ASP.NET code that you would run in your own servers. And when you build the client application that talks to your server or the client application that talks to Azure, you're going to build it using VPF, or you're going to build it using HTML5, or you're going to build it using Silverlight. And so again, you've got this consistent story where I can build cloud-based computing, I can build my server, use my servers, or I can build software as a service with clients that talk to different servers. And I get to do this all with the same development tools and platform. So this picture tries to bring all of this together and suggest that if you're using Visual Studio and you're using .NET, you can build software for the Windows Server stack, or you can build software for the Windows Azure Cloud stack, and it's really the same thing. So moving on to maybe a little more specifics. If you are building web applications, how many people are web developers? Maybe half, maybe less. If you're a web developer, in my view, the technologies that you should be looking at are HTML5 and Silverlight, in terms of building your client. In terms of building code that's going to run on your Windows server, it's still ASP.NET. However, if you are using web forms, great. Right? Web forms work. Web forms are continuing to work. Microsoft is continuing to enhance them and make them better. But I do think that if you're building or planning to build high-powered HTML5 applications, where the client application is built using JavaScript and is running in the browser and is communicating to services that you are running on your server, you probably should consider ASP.NET MVC. ASP.NET MVC is I think, better technology for building the next generation of web applications. It might not be as productive, especially if you know web forms. If you are really involved in web forms and you're very productive with web forms, there is a learning curve to move to ASP MVC. However, it might be worth it, because it certainly makes things easier if you're building smart client applications using JavaScript. I can't believe I just said that. Smart client applications. But that's what people are talking about. I mean, really, that's what people are talking about with HTML5. Oh, I know, HTML5 can play video. Oh, that's exciting, right? So can Silverlight and Flash. I can't say that I care, right? If I can go to YouTube and watch a video, I don't care if it's HTML5 or not. To me, what makes HTML5 interesting is that there's supposed to be a more powerful programming model in the browser. And there's supposed to be more consistency in the browser. How many people think that will come true? We hope. I did not see anybody raise a hand. This is good. You know the definition of insanity, right? It's where you try something and it fails, and you try the same thing and it fails, and you try the same thing and it fails. If you try it again, that's insanity. So HTML1, no consistency. HTML2, 3, and HTML4, no consistency across browsers, right? I mean, if you program your application to generate the perfect output for Firefox, it probably won't work in Internet Explorer. Right? Is that not true? And that's been true for the entire life of the web since 1996 or 1997. So why do we think HTML5 will be any better? Well, we can hope. Right? So for me, I'm a Silverlight person. I really like Silverlight. The reason that I like Silverlight, there's really two big reasons. One, and this is the big one, I get to use C# to build my applications that run in the browser. I don't have to mess with JavaScript. Two, Silverlight is a consistent runtime. So if I build an application in Silverlight, it's going to work on Windows. It's going to work on the Mac. It's going to work on the Windows Phone. It's going to work in Internet Explorer and Firefox and Chrome. And I'm happy. I get to build my software once and do a little bit of testing. Whereas with HTML, I get to build my software once and then more or less rewrite it to work in the second browser and then tweak it to work in the third browser and spend the rest of my life getting it to run in Safari. Right? Am I cynical? I'm sorry. So to me, these are the key technologies from a career perspective. In terms of a web developer, you should be investing in learning Silverlight or Asp Net-Mvc and jQuery and HTML5. I'm not going to spend a lot more time on cloud computing because I think two people care. But if you are interested in cloud computing, it's worth investigating, and Microsoft is almost continually giving away 1-month trials for Azure, trying to get people to at least try it, to see how compelling it is. And it can be compelling. I know you're not excited. I sense this. Right? However, just think about this. If I build a component that runs in Azure, and then it starts running too slowly, I can either spend a lot of time making it better, which is maybe what I should do, or I can change a configuration file and run it on 500 computers. It'll run very fast. Right? That's supposed to be a joke. I know, it's the end of the day. However, I want to talk just briefly about something that I think is interesting on the Windows Server side. Right, so there's Windows Azure, that's for the cloud. But I get the idea that most of you are interested in things that run on Windows Server in your data center. So how many people have looked at App Fabric, the Windows Server App Fabric? Right, just 2 or 3, 4? You should look at this. Here's my take, my perspective on App Fabric. And I know Microsoft won't like this, but this is the way I look at it. I've been doing Microsoft programming for a long time, right? And so I did Microsoft programming through the 1990s when Microsoft introduced Microsoft Transaction Server and then COM+. And to me, one of the most important features of COM+ was that it gave me a way of installing and managing and monitoring my components on the server. You might remember the little spinning balls that were in Microsoft Transaction Server. And so we could have a computer screen and we could watch everything spin and go, oh, it's working. It was like Star Trek with all the blinking lights, right? If today, you're probably building web services using either ASMX web services or VCF, right? How do you monitor and deploy and manage your services. How do you know if your service is running? How do you know how many of your services are running? And how do you know how loaded they are, how busy they are? Is there anything automatic to do that? Probably not. If you want to answer those questions, you probably have to write your own monitoring software. That's too bad. So App Fabric is kind of like Com Plus for VCF, only in a good way. Well, you know, I mean, we all left COM to go to .NET, so, you know, but it gives us some sort of deployment and monitoring and management capability for our VCF services, right? To me, this is very compelling. And yes, I realize that App Fabric has more features. It does better stuff. It's got in-memory caching and things like that, or distributed caching. But to me, the big thing is that it helps me manage my services. If I'm building a smart client application, and I like building smart client applications, the two technologies I think that are most important are VPF and Silverlight. And hopefully at this point, you start to realize why I think Silverlight is so impressive. Because Silverlight is one of the big web technologies, and Silverlight is one of the big smart client technologies. And so if I learn how to do Silverlight work, I'm a web developer and I'm a Windows developer. And even better yet, I'm now a Windows Phone developer. All with one technology. So to me, Silverlight is really important. But also I think VPF is very important. Because while Silverlight lets me write Windows applications and web applications and phone applications, VPF lets me really create powerful Windows applications that use everything Windows can do. And Silverlight does not do that. However, the good part of the story is that both Silverlight and VPF use XAML, the XML markup language, to describe most of their user interface. And so if I invest in learning XAML, it makes me able to program in both VPF and Silverlight, at least to a large degree. And so the highlights here for a smart client for a Windows developer, I think you should be investing in learning VPF, you should be investing in learning Silverlight. Hopefully you're happy with Windows 7 as a client. I mean, I'm a Microsoft advocate, right? I like working with Microsoft. And yet, Windows Vista, I was not an advocate. I couldn't suggest that people install it. I installed it, and it was painful. How many people remember Windows Me, Windows Millennium? Right? So Vista was not quite that bad. Right? But Windows 7 is great. Honestly, for most of my computers, I went directly from Windows XP to Windows 7. It was wonderful. How many people are running Windows 7? See, almost everyone. And I think this is really compelling, and Microsoft saved themselves, right? I mean, Windows Vista really was helping Apple a lot. I don't know, in Europe, did you have the commercials with the Apple commercials with the two guys that were making fun of, you didn't have those? Oh, Apple had some good commercials, which was bad for Microsoft. But they've gone away now because Windows 7 is hard to make fun of. It's just so good. Windows Phone 7 is also a smart client target. So almost everyone said you had a smartphone, and I'm curious, how many people have looked at Windows Phone 7, the new phone that's coming out? Right, just a few. Right. How many people are excited? You think the phone is going to, right? No? I had one for a week. an actual phone. I spent a week with it. I'm in love. Of course, I'm not an iPhone user, so maybe, but it's very, very nice. It's very smooth. The operating system is easy to learn. The hardware is fast. And to me, the most compelling thing is that I get to program it using Silverlight. Right? So I get to use the same tools and technologies that I'm already using in order to build phone applications. It'll be interesting to see whether or not the market agrees, right? It doesn't matter if I like it. It matters if consumers purchase the phone. I also want to talk just briefly about a trend that I think is absolutely important. And this has very little to do with Microsoft. This has to do with hardware. How many of you have single-core computers? Oh, you poor man. Just these one or two people over here going, yeah, my company is poor. I don't. So everybody tends to have at least dual-core computers, and some people have quad. And I don't mean to brag or anything, but my laptop has 8. In 2 or 3 years, I think I will have a laptop that will have 16 cores. Is this not cool? Right? The next computer that my mother buys will have at least 4. I mean, think about that. The retail stores today sell dual-core computers, but the next generation will be 4, or maybe 8. Right? The Intel i7 chips. Normal users, not us, right? We're not normal. We're developers. We're really not normal. The next generation of computers that normal people have are going to have 8 cores. So how do you leverage multiple cores? Well, you have multiple threads in your application. And why does this matter? Well, so I have 8 cores, right? How fast do you think each core is? I think it's like 2.1 gigahertz, something like that. My previous laptop was a dual-core computer. How fast do you think each core was? I think it was 2.7 gigahertz. So think about that. This computer has 8 cores that are slower than my previous computer. So did I win? Am I better or worse off? Well, if my application only uses 1 thread, it will now run slower. If your applications only use 1 thread, they're not getting faster, and they might be getting slower. Which means that you need to think about how to use parallel computing in order to make your applications use the new hardware. Oop, I didn't mean to do that. And Microsoft, especially in .NET 4, has introduced a set of new features that will help you do that. The task parallel library, a parallel link, a whole set of new components in system.threading that you can use to do this. The final thing that I want to talk about just briefly is data. Obviously, we think, as developers, we tend to think that our data is in relational databases, like SQL Server and Oracle and so forth. And we might run it, well, we probably run it in a database in our data center. Microsoft and Amazon would like us to run our data in their data centers using SQL Azure or other tools. But the reality is that an awful lot of data, in fact, things that I've read, say that there is more data in Excel than there is in relational databases. Because end users put their data into Excel. And so Microsoft has got a long-term strategy out of the SQL team where they're looking at a lot of different things. Like, how do we tap into large amounts of relational data, but also how do we bring in non-relational data, and how do we start to analyze this data? If your organization starts to collect terabytes of data in your database, just how useful is that? Unless you can analyze it, unless you can create meaningful reports and graphical representations. And so there's a lot of work being done inside of Microsoft around creating tools, both inside of SQL Server, but also inside of Office and inside of SharePoint, that let us really take advantage of this data. Of course, from a developer perspective, we have confusion. We have maybe 6 or 8 different ways to talk to a database. ADO.NET and datasets and link to SQL and the entity framework. So this slide lists the 3 technologies that I think you should look at. The core technology for building any sort of data access is raw ADO.NET, the connection, the command, the data reader. Those technologies have not changed in any meaningful way for 15 years. So if you want to build a data access layer that will stand the test of time, you probably should build it using connections, commands, and data readers. But a lot of people want more productivity, better abstraction. And the place where Microsoft is putting all of their energy is the entity framework. And so I feel comfortable suggesting that at least for a few years, if you want to have a technology that will be a good place to work with, it's the entity framework. And the last of the 3 is something called Wcf Data Services. It used to be called .NET Data Services, and before that it was called Astoria. But Wcf Data Services allows us to create something called OData. And to me, OData has the potential to change the way we think about data on the internet. Let me say that again, because I'm not kidding. OData has the potential to change the way we think about data on the internet. If you build an application today that pulls data from an internet service and that pulls data from your own service inside of your company, how similar are the data formats? They're probably completely different. Everyone that creates a service defines their own data format. OData is a standard. You can go to odata.org and look at the standard. It's based essentially on RSS, or Atom. And it describes a way for all of us to publish our data in a format that is consistent. And if we do this, it means that we can all write client applications that consume data from many different services, and then you can use things like link to do joins across data from different services. So think about being able to take your customer data and join it with data from the government that maybe tells you about the relative wealth or crime rates or different information from a demographic perspective, and what you could do if you can start joining your data with other data from other organizations. I mean, this is exciting stuff, and it's very compelling. And if you use Microsoft's WCF Data Services, which is built into Visual Studio 2010, it makes it very easy for you to publish your data in this standard and to consume services that are built using it. Some detail, but I'm told that I'm running out of time, so that's okay. So to me, yeah, we live in interesting times. The whole reason that I'm in the computer industry is because it's constantly changing. Right? If I wanted consistency, I would have been an accountant. Nothing ever changes. Right? I add numbers on one side, I subtract numbers on the other side, and I pay taxes. Right? But I live in the computer world because it's constantly changing. We go from teletype computers with 110 baud modems and we go through mini computers, and we go through PCs, and we have amazing graphics. Now we're on the verge of having meaningful speech recognition, meaningful video recognition, and we're looking at a world where computing is everywhere. It's in servers, it's on my desktop, it's in my phone, it's in my car. And the really exciting thing to me is that I can use the Microsoft technologies. I can use .NET, I can use Silverlight, I can use ASP.NET to build applications for all of them. Makes it for a very exciting time. Thank you very much.